Okay, Luke Green, I'm going to talk about my character Lucretia a little bit here. Um, Lucretia is the main character of my book Bystander, the cover of which you're seeing here as done by Genzelman. I'm going to go through some of the development of her. I've taken out some of the pictures of her, especially ones that contain characters that do not copyright to me that I had done by like Fred Perry. There's a picture of Lucretia flirting with Brianna from Gold Digger. That's about it. Um, Lucretia has gone through a lot of changes. Starting, this is what she looked like originally when I invented her around the late '90s. She still has the dresses, though that's a rather ugly dress. She's still wearing the feminine stuff. She's still got the smug face, but she has the yellow eyes instead of the blue eyes, and they're cat's eyes rather than human eyes. The braids are still there. She's got a cat tail for whatever reason. The cat stuff ended up going towards another character in the world setting. There'll be one or more cat related individuals in the world settings, shape changers and such. Also, at this time, she was going to be a much more stereotypical superhero type setting. Instead of, say, the one I have now, which is kind of superhero. The super beings are known to exist, but there are no superheroes. The law enforcement types work directly for the police, and they wear the police uniform. Same with military. There are some criminals, of course, but for the most part, most super beings, or peaks as they are called in the world, do mundane jobs. This was back when I was thinking of more stereotypical super world with secret identities and such. And one thing I didn't want for Lucretia is I didn't want her to have a secret identity. I threw away all the cat stuff, and I ended up with what is basically the first version of the eventual development what Lucretia ended up as. The braids are kind of in right there. She's got the definite Japanese look to her face. She wasn't originally considered either Japanese or whatever. Even now, the idea of Japanese descent is kind of in question. She looks like she's Asian descent. And her mother did wear kimonos, but that's about it. This is another picture of her. The braids are still there, but they're a little bit thinner than they ended up being. No, she's still wearing a high neck dress. So the high necks are there. This is before she was so thoroughly screwed up mentally as she is now. She is also very much a more physical character at this point, as you saw before when she had the force field. At this point, I dropped the force field, and I made her just a standard brick with super strength powers. A lot more physical. This was when she was intended to be more of a bruiser, not the thinker that she ended up being. She was smart, but she wasn't brilliant. Not the way she is in the story now, where even in the story she's kind of uneducated, brilliant, just sort of develops. And that comes to one of this, which is a scene I might eventually use, but I haven't yet. She doesn't know enough about martial arts to pull this off. She basically moves her head such that somebody breaks their arm when they try to punch her. And this again, she could actually pull this off, but this is just raw strength. Her strength even now is at the rate where basically if it's colder, she's stronger. If you get her down to absolute zero, she'll be extremely strong and fast and other such things. I also always wanted her to be more physical oriented, but wear physical oriented powers, but wear the dresses. This right here really started on her personality and her backstory. Just the picture of her rather young, looking in the woods, in the wilderness, on her own, looking off to the side, rather lonely. This image, when I drew up in work, back when I could still draw somewhat, is probably one of the more key things that directed me on this path. At this point, her snarkiness, overconfidence, and general jerkiness became a facade, something she put on, something that wasn't true. I also put in, and it might sound kind of stereotypical, but this is where I put in the drinking problem. Now, there are some things towards Lucretia's drinking problem that are not immediately apparent, that won't be revealed in the first couple books, assuming I get them all done successfully. But at this point, she was still a sad drunk rather than the happy drunk that she ended up being now. Um, this is probably the last time I ended up using yellow in one of her costumes. The blue there, the light blue is kind of what she does like using that on trims. The dark blue she does like using major, but I don't use the yellow so much. This is an image of her at about age 5. The footprints were put in there to show a size discrepancy. They wouldn't have those kind of treads now. I'm not even sure if footprints would have even been left by the individual that killed her parents and tried to kill her. This was before I had her blood and other body parts reduced into basically dirty water after being parted from her. But that only happens that wouldn't happen in sub-freezing temperatures anyway. This picture is the first one of her in the library. My original thought was give her a job that is the most boring one a physical oriented person could find. And this is at the time by this point she's less physical oriented, more mental oriented, but the library is still a chore. I ended up writing this one, drawing this one, and at this point reading the books became her biggest hobby. And this is basically her reading problems. The difficulty she has reading due to her sensory abilities have not been put into her character yet. That was really late. In fact, the picture by Genzelman is the only commissioned picture after the point where I developed that part of her character. At this point, she could still read normally. It came up with the other thing as a consequence of her special sight and not being able to filter it. This is the first start of pictures that were done by other people for me. I'm starting with the ones that were given to me for free first. This one was done by someone in the City of Heroes beta forums way back when I was considering using Lucretia as a character there. Eventually, I decided not because I didn't want to risk losing copyright to her. This is another picture of the same. You notice the braids aren't there. When I have people do her on commission, some of them forget that she wears the braids constantly. The braids are important to her. They're connected to memories of her and her mother and her father, just like the dresses that she likes to wear. Then the pantsuit that she's wearing here is less of a dress than she would wear. Now, I entered the monthly original Bisojo in every month for a while to practice my drawing. And eventually I won and used Lucretia as the I put up Lucretia as the character of interest for the next contest. This one is showing I've already determined that she eats messily because she lived most of her life on her own. And also by this point her tendency from this set of pictures, her tendency to put together traditional costumes started to come into being. This Victorian one probably she was probably wearing something like this at the beginning of when she met Novak. This is another picture. This is probably what she would wear as a kind of Chinese style dress, except she wouldn't have the bits at the shoulders. She would be covered up from neck to heel. There would be a latex bodysuit underneath worn as underwear. Notice the braids are gone. This is one of my favorite pictures. This picture is probably the reason why she eventually ended up becoming instantly nicer around children